Welcome to Thueringer for Farming Simulator 15. We now continue in our reading of The Octopus, a story of California by Frank Norris, in Book 2, Chapter 3. She emerged from out the invisible. He beheld her, a figure of gold and pale vermilion, redolent of perfume, poised motionless in the faint saffron sheen of the new-risen moon. She, a creation of sleep, was herself asleep. She, a dream, was herself dreaming. Called forth from out the darkness, from the grip of the earth, the embrace of the grave, from out the memory of corruption, she rose into light and life divinely pure. Across that white forehead was no smudge, no trace of an earthly pollution, no mark of a terrestrial dishonor. He saw in her the same beauty of untainted innocence he had known in his youth. Years had made no difference with her. She was still young. It was the old purity that returned, the deathless beauty, the ever-renascent life, the eternal, consecrated, and immortal youth. For a few seconds she stood there before him, and he, upon the ground at her feet, looked up at her spellbound. Then, slowly she withdrew, still asleep, her eyelids closed. She turned from him, descending the slope. She was gone. Vanity started up, coming, as it were, to himself, looking wildly about him. Saria was there. "I saw her," said the priest. "It was Angel, the little girl, your Angel's daughter. She is like her mother." But Vanity scarcely heard. He walked as if in a trance, pushing by Saria, going forth from the garden. Angel or Angel's daughter, it was all one with him. It was she. Death was overcome. The grave vanquished. Life, ever renewed, alone existed. Time was not. Change was not. All things were immortal but evil. All things eternal but grief. Suddenly the dawn came. The east burned rosette toward the zenith. The enemy walked on, he knew not where. The dawn grew brighter. At length he paused on the crest of a hill overlooking the ranchos, and cast his eye below him to the southward. Then, suddenly flinging up his arms, he uttered a great cry. There it was! The wheat! The wheat! In the night it had come up. It was there, everywhere, from margin to margin of the horizon. The earth, long empty, teemed with green life. Once more the pendulum of the seasons swung in its mighty arc, from death back to life, life out of death, eternity rising from out dissolution. There was the lesson. Angel was not the symbol, but the proof of immortality. The seed dying, rotting, and corrupting in the earth, rising again in life unconquerable and in immaculate purity. Angel dying as she gave birth to her little daughter, life springing from her death, the pure, unconquerable, coming forth from the defiled. Why had he not had the knowledge of God? Thou fool, that which thou sowest is not quickened except it die. So the seed had died, so died Angel. But that which thou sowest not that body that shall be, but bare grain. It may chance of wheat or of some other grain. The wheat called forth from out the darkness, from out the grip of the earth, of the grave, from out corruption, rose triumphant into light and life. So Angel, so life, so also the resurrection of the dead. It is sown in corruption, it is raised in incorruption. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. Death, was swallowed up in victory. The sun rose, the night was over. The glory of the terrestrial was one, and the glory of the celestial was another. Then, as the glory of sun banished the lesser glory of moon and stars, Vanamee from his mountain top, beholding the eternal green life of the growing wheat, bursting its bonds, and in his heart exulting in his triumph over the grave, flung out his arms with a mighty shout. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? Chapter 4. Presley's socialistic poem, The Toileters, had an enormous success. The editor of the Sunday supplement of the San Francisco paper to which it was sent printed it in Gothic type with the scarehead title, so decorative as to be almost illegible, and furthermore caused the poem to be illustrated by one of the paper's staff artists in a most impressive fashion. The whole affair occupied an entire page. Thus advertised, the poem attracted attention. It was promptly copied in New York, Boston, and Chicago papers. It was discussed, attacked, defended, eulogized, ridiculed. It was praised with some of the most fulsome adulation, assailed with the most violent condemnation. Editorials were written upon it. Special articles in literary pamphlets dissected its rhetoric and prosody. The phrases were quoted were used as texts for revolutionary sermons, reactionary speeches. It was parodied. It was distorted so as to read as an advertisement for patented cereals and infants' foods. Finally, the editor of an enterprising monthly magazine reprinted the poem, supplementing it by a photograph and biography of Presley himself. Presley was stunned, bewildered. He began to wonder at himself. Was he actually the greatest American poet since Bryant? He had had no thought of fame while composing The Toilers. He had only been moved to his heart's foundations, thoroughly in earnest, seeing clearly, and had addressed himself to the poem's composition in a happy moment when words came easily to him, and the elaboration of fine sentences was not difficult. Was it thus fame was achieved? For a while he was tempted to cross the continent and go to New York and there come into his own, enjoying the triumph that awaited him. But soon he denied himself this cheap reward. Now he was too much in earnest. He wanted to help his people, the community in which he lived, the little world of the San Joaquin. At grapples with the railroad, the struggle had found its poet. He told himself that his place was here. Only the words of the manager of a lecture bureau troubled him for a moment. To range the entire nation, telling all his countrymen of the drama that was working itself out on this fringe of the continent, this ignored and distant Pacific coast, rousing their interest and stirring them up to action, appealed to him. It might do great good to devote himself to the cause, accepting no penny of remuneration, to give his life to loosening the grip of the iron-hearted monster of steel and steam, would be beyond question heroic. Other states than California had their grievances. All over the country the family of Cyclops was growing. He would declare himself the champion of the people in their opposition to the trust. He would be an apostle, a prophet, a martyr of freedom. But Presley was essentially a dreamer, not a man of affairs. He hesitated to act at this precise psychological moment, striking while the iron was yet hot. And while he hesitated, other affairs near at hand began to absorb his attention. One night, about an hour after he had gone to bed, he was awakened by the sound of voices on the porch of the ranch house, and descending, found Mrs. Dyke there with Sidney. The ex-engineer's mother was talking to Magnus and Heron and crying as she talked. It seemed that Dyke was missing. He had gone into town early that afternoon with the wagon and team and was to have been home for supper. By now it was 10 o'clock and there was no news of him. Mrs. Dyke told how she first had gone to Queen Sabe, intending to telephone from there to Bonneville, but Annister was in San Francisco, and in his absence the house was locked up, and the overseer, who had a duplicate key, was himself in Bonneville. She had telegraphed 3 times from Guadalajara to Bonneville for news of her son, but without result. Then at last, tortured with anxiety, she had gone to Hooven's, taking Sidney with her, and had prevailed upon Bismarck to hitch up and drive her across Los Muertos to the governor's to beg him to telephone into Bonneville to know what had become of Dyke. While Heron rang up Central in town, Mrs. Dyke told Presley and Magnus of the lamentable change in Dyke. "They have broken my son's spirit, Mr. Derrick," she said. "If you were only there to see, hour after hour he sits on the porch with his hands lying open in his lap, looking at them without a word. He won't look me in the face any more, and he won't sleep. Night after night he has walked the floor until morning. And he will go on that way for days together, very silent, without a word, and sitting still in his chair, and then all of a sudden he will break out. Oh, Mr. Derrick, it is terrible, into an awful rage, cursing, swearing, grinding his teeth, his hands clenched over his head, stamping so that the house shakes, and saying that if S. Behrman don't give him back his money, he will kill him with his 2 hands. But that isn't the worst, Mr. Derrick. He goes to Mr. Carraher's saloon now and stays there for hours and listens to Mr. Carraher. There is something on my son's mind. I know there is. Something that he and Mr. Carraher have talked over together, and I can't find out what it is. Mr. Carraher is a bad man, and my son has fallen under his influence." The tears filled her eyes. Bravely she turned to hide them, turning away to take Sidney in her arms, putting her head upon the little girl's shoulder. I haven't broken down before, Mr. Derrick," she said, but after we have been so happy in our little house, just us 3, and the future seems so bright. Oh, God will punish the gentleman who owned the railroad for being so hard and cruel." Heron came out on the porch from the telephone, and she interrupted herself, fixing her eyes eagerly upon him. "I think it is all right, Mrs. Dyke," he said reassuringly. "We know where he is, I believe. You and the little tad stay here, and Hooven and I will go after him." About 2 hours later, Heron brought Dyke back to Los Muertos in Hooven's wagon. He had found him at Carraher's saloon, very drunk. There was nothing maudlin about Dyke's drunkenness. In him, the alcohol merely roused the spirit of evil, vengeful, reckless. As a wagon passed out from under the eucalyptus trees about the ranch house, taking Mrs. Dyke, Sidney, and the one-time engineer back to the hop ranch, Presley, leaning from his window, heard the latter remark, "Carraher is right. There is only one thing they listen to, and that's dynamite." The following day, Presley drove Magnus over to Guadalajara to take the train for San Francisco. But after he had said goodbye to the governor, he was moved to go on to the hop ranch to see the condition of the affairs in that quarter. He returned to Los Muertos, overwhelmed with sadness and trembling with anger. The hop ranch that he had last seen in the full tide of prosperity was almost a ruin. Work had evidently been abandoned long since. Weeds were already choking the vines. Everywhere the poles sagged and drooped. Many had even fallen, dragging the vines with them, spreading them over the ground in an inextricable tangle of dead leaves, decaying tendrils, and snarled string. The fence was broken, the unfinished storehouse, which never was to see completion, was a lamentable spectacle of gaping doors and windows, a melancholy skeleton. Last of all, Presley had caught a glimpse of Dyke himself, seated in his rocking chair on the porch, his beard and hair unkempt, motionless, looking with vague eyes upon his hands that lay palm upwards and idle in his lap. Magnus, on his way to San Francisco, was joined at Bonneville by Osterman. Upon seating himself in front of the master of Los Muertos in the smoking car of the train, this latter, pushing back his hat and smoothing his bald head, observed, "Governor, you look all frazzled out. Anything wrong these days?" The other answered in the negative, but for all that, Osterman was right. The governor had aged suddenly. His former erectness was gone. The broad shoulders stooped a little. The strong lines of his thin-lipped mouth were relaxed, and his hand, as it clasped over the yellowed ivory knob of his cane, had an unwonted tremulousness not hitherto noticeable. But the change in Magnus was more than physical. At last, in the full tide of power, president of the League, known and talked of in every county of the state, leader in a great struggle, consulted, deferred to as the prominent man, at length attaining that position, so long and vainly sought for, he had found no pleasure in his triumph, and little but bitterness in life. His success had come by devious methods, had been reached by obscure means. He was a briber. He could never forget that. To further his ends, disinterested, public-spirited, even philanthropic as those were, he had connived with knavery. He, the politician of the old school, of such rigorous integrity, who had abandoned a career rather than compromise with honesty. At this 11th hour, involved and entrapped in the fine-spun web of a new order of things, bewildered by Osterman's dexterity, by his volubility and glibness, goaded and harassed beyond the point of reason by the aggression of the trust he fought, he had at last failed. He had fallen, he had given a bribe. He had thought that, after all, this would make a little difference with him. The affair was known only to Osterman, Broderson, and Annixter. They would not judge him, being themselves involved. He could still preserve a bold front. He could still hold his head high. As time went on, the affair would lose its point. But this was not so. Some subtle element of his character had forsaken him. He felt it. He knew it. Some certain stiffness that had given him all his rigidity, that had lent force to his authority, weight to his dominance, temper to his fine, inflexible hardness, was diminishing day by day. In the decisions which he, as president of the League, was called upon to make so often, he now hesitated. He could no longer be arrogant, masterful, acting upon his own judgment, independent of opinion. He began to consult his lieutenants, asking their advice, distrusting his own opinions. He made mistakes, blunders, and when those were brought to his notice, took refuge in bluster. He knew it to be bluster, knew that sooner or later his subordinates would recognize it as such. How long could he maintain his position? So only he could keep his grip upon the lever of control till the battle was over. All would be well. If not, he would fall, and once fallen, he knew that now, briber that he was, he would never rise again. He was on his way at this moment to the city to consult with Lyman as to a certain issue of the contest between the railroad and the ranchers, which of late had been brought to his notice. When appeal had been taken to the Supreme Court by the League's Executive Committee, certain test cases had been chosen, which should represent all the lands in question. Neither Magnus nor Annixter had so appealed, believing, of course, that their cases were covered by the test cases on trial at Washington. Magnus had here blundered again, and the League's agents in San Francisco had written to warn him that the railroad might be able to take advantage of a technicality, and by pretending that neither Quien Sabe nor Los Muertos were included in the appeal, attempt to put its dummy buyers in possession of the two ranches before the Supreme Court handed down its decision. The 90 days allowed for taking this appeal were nearly at an end, and after then the railroad could act. Osterman and Magnus at once decided to go up to the city, there joining Annixter, who had been absent from Quien Sabe for the last 10 days, and talk the matter over with Lyman. Lyman, because of his position as commissioner, might be cognizant of the railroad's plans, and at the same time could give sound legal advice as to what was to be done should the new rumor prove true. "Say," remarked Osterman as the train pulled out of the Bonneville station, and the two men settled themselves for the long journey. "Say, Governor, what's all up with Buck Annixter these days? He's got a bean about something, sure." "I had not noticed," answered Magnus. "Mr. Annixter has been away some time lately. I cannot imagine what should keep him so long in San Francisco." "That's it," said Osterman, winking. "Have 3 guesses. Guess right and you get a cigar. I guess Girl spells Hilma Tree. And a little while ago she quit Quien Sabe and hiked out to Frisco. So did Buck. Do I draw the cigar? It's up to you." "I have noticed her," observed Magnus, "a fine figure of a woman. She would make some man a good wife." "Ho, wife! Buck's Annixter marry? Not much. He's gone a girling at last, old Buck. It's as funny as twins. Have to josh him about it when I see him shore." But when Osterman and Magnus at last fell in with Annixter in the vestibule of the Lick House on Montgomery Street, nothing could be got out of him. He was in an execrable humor. When Magnus had broached the subject of business, he had declared that all business could go to pot, and when Osterman, his tongue in his cheek, had permitted himself a most distant allusion to a female girl, Annixter had cursed him for a busy face so vociferously and tersely that even Osterman was cowed. "Well," insinuated Osterman, "what are you dallying around Frisco so much for?" "Cat fur, to make kitchen breeches," retorted Annixter with oracular vagueness. 2 weeks before this time, Annixter had come to the city and had gone at once to a certain hotel on Bush Street behind the First National Bank that he knew was kept by a family connection of the Trees. In his conjecture that Hilma and her parents would stop here, he was right. Their names were on the register. Ignoring custom, Annixter marched straight up to their rooms, and before he was well aware of it, was eating crow before old man Tree. Hilma and her mother were out at the time. Later on, Mrs. Tree returned alone, leaving Hilma to spend the day with one of her cousins, who lived far out on Stanton Street in a little house facing the park. Between Annixter and Hilma's parents, a reconciliation had been effected, Annixter convincing them both of his sincerity in wishing to make Hilma his wife. Hilma, however, refused to see him. As soon as she knew he had followed her to San Francisco, she had been unwilling to return to the hotel, and she had arranged with her cousin to spend an indefinite time at her house. She was wretchedly unhappy during all this time, would not set foot out of doors, and cried herself to sleep night after night. She detested the city. Already she was miserably homesick for the ranch. She remembered the days she had spent in the little dairy house, happy in her work, making butter and cheese, skimming the great pans of milk, scouring the copper vessels and vats, plunging her arms elbow deep into the white curds, coming and going in that atmosphere of freshness, cleanliness, and sunlight, gay, singing, supremely happy just because the sun shone. She remembered her long walks toward the mission late in the afternoons, her excursions for cresses underneath the long trestle, the crowing of the cocks, the distant whistle of the passing trains, the faint sounding of the Angelus. She recalled with infinite longing the solitary expanse of the ranches, the level reaches between the horizons, full of light and silence, the heat at noon, the cloudless iridescence of the sunrise and sunset. She had been so happy in that life. Now all these days were past. This crude, raw city with its crowded houses, all the wood and tin, its blotting fogs, its uproarious trade winds, disturbed and saddened her. There was no outlook for the future. At length, one day, about a week after Annixter's arrival in the city, she was prevailed upon to go for a walk in the park. She went alone, putting on for the first time the little hat of black straw with its puff of white silk her mother had bought for her, a pink shirt-waist, her belt of imitation alligator skin, her new skirt of brown cloth, and her low shoes set off with their little steel buckles. She found a tiny summer house built in Japanese fashion around a diminutive pond and sat there for a while, her hands folded in her lap, amused with watching the goldfish, wishing she knew not what. Without warning, Annixter sat down beside her. She was too frightened to move. She looked at him with wide eyes and began to fill with tears. "Oh," she said at last. "Oh, I didn't know." "Well," exclaimed Annixter, "here you are at last. I've been watching that blamed house till I was afraid the policeman would move me on. By the Lord," he suddenly cried, you're pale. Hilma, do you feel well?" "Yes, I am well," she faltered. "No, you're not," he declared. "I know better. You are coming back to Quien-Sabe with me. This place, it don't agree with you. Hilma, what's all the matter? Why haven't you let me see you all this time? Do you know how things are with me? Your mother told you, didn't she? Do you know how sorry I am? Do you know that I see now that I made the mistake of my life there, that time, under the long trestle? I found it out on the night after you went away. I sat all night on a stone outside on the ranch somewhere, and I don't know exactly what happened, but I've been a different man ever since. I see things all different now. Why, I've only begun to live since then. I know what love means now, and instead of being ashamed of it, I'm proud of it. If I never was to see you again, I would be glad I lived through that night just the same. I just woke up that night. I've been absolutely and completely selfish up to the moment I realized I really loved you, and now, whether you let me marry you or not, I mean to live, I don't know, in a different way. I've got to live different. Well, I can't make you understand, but just loving you has changed my life all around. It's made it easier to do the clean thing. I want to do it. It's fun doing it. Remember once I said I was proud of being a hard man, a driver, of being glad that people hated me and were afraid of me? Well, since I loved you, I'm ashamed of it all. I don't want to be hard anymore, and nobody is going to hate me if I can help it. I'm happy, and I want other people so. I love you, he suddenly exclaimed. I love you, and if you will forgive me, and if you will come down to such a beast as I am, I want to be to you the best man can be to a woman, Hilma. Do you understand, little girl? I want to be your husband. Hilma looked at the goldfishes through her tears. Have you got anything to say to me, Hilma? He asked after a while. I don't know what you want me to say, she murmured. Yes, you do, he insisted. I've followed you way up here to hear it. I've waited around in these beastly drafty picnic grounds for over a week to hear it. You know what I want to hear, Hilma. Well, I forgive you, she hazarded. That will do for a starter, he answered. But that's not it. Well, then I don't know what. Shall I say it for you? She hesitated a long minute, and you mightn't say it right, she replied. Trust me for that. Shall I say it for you, Hilma? I don't know what you'll say. I'll say what you are thinking of. Shall I say it? There was a very long pause. A goldfish rose to the surface of the little pond with a sharp rippling sound. The fog drifted overhead. There was nobody about. No, said Hilma at length. I can say it for myself. All at once she turned to him and put her arms around his neck. Oh, do you love me? She cried. Is it really true? Do you mean every word of it? And you are sorry and you will be good to me if I will be your wife? You will be my dear, dear husband? The tears sprang to Annixter's eyes. He took her in his arms and held her there for a moment. Never in his life had he felt so unworthy, so undeserving of this clean, pure girl who forgave him and trusted his spoken word and believed him to be the good man he could only wish to be. She was so far above him, so exalted, so noble that he should have bowed his forehead to her feet, and instead she took him in her arms, believing him to be good, to be her equal. He could think no words to say. The tears overflowed his eyes and ran down upon his cheeks. She drew away from him and held him at a second at arm's length, looking at him, and he saw that she, too, had been crying. I think, he said, we are a couple of softies. No, no, she insisted. I want to cry, and I want you to cry, too. Oh, dear, I haven't a handkerchief. Here, take mine. They wiped each other's eyes like two children and for a long time sat in the deserted little Japanese pleasure house, their arms about each other, talking. On the following Saturday, they were married in an uptown Presbyterian church and spent the week of their honeymoon at a small family hotel on Sutter Street. As a matter of course, they saw the sights of the city together. They made the inevitable bridal trip to the Cliff House and spent an afternoon in the gruesome and made-to-order beauties of Suttrose Gardens. They went through Chinatown, the Palace Hotel, the Park Museum, where Hilma resolutely refused to believe in the Egyptian mummy, and they drove out in a hired hack to the Presidio and the Golden Gate. On the 6th day of their excursions, Hilma abruptly declared they had had enough of playing out and must be serious and get to work.